Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Gaug. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Cutting Edge Laser Technologies, and I'll be your moderator today. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to everyone who was able to join us tonight for the first webinar in our new Cutting Edge Campus webinar series. In just a minute, we'll hear from our guest speaker, Rem Jackson. He'll speak for about 45 minutes, which will then be followed by a Q&A session. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please submit them to the moderator in your GoToWebinar taskbar. If we are unable to get to your question, we will make sure to email you a response from Rem in the coming days. We also plan to send a PDF version of today's presentation and a link to the recording to all of tonight's attendees. And finally, if you found that tonight's webinar added value for your practice, please plan to join us again on Thursday, May 28th for part 2 with Dr. Kevin Mullen and Dr. Melissa Lockwood to see real examples of REM's methods being implemented. With that being said, I won't waste any more time, so here's my colleague, Joe Kenrick, who will introduce tonight's speaker. Joe?
Thank you, Joe. Cutting Edge has been helping doctors grow their practice for 20 years, and as such, we understand some of the challenges that doctors in private practice are going through. We decided we needed a way to help these doctors, not only our customers, but other private practice owners in general, to navigate the challenges they are presently facing so they can confidently take their practice into the future. We are very fortunate to have Rem Jackson of Top Practices to kick off the first of these ongoing educational seminars. Rem Jackson is the CEO and the founder of Top Practices and has been guiding medical professionals and business leaders as a coach and a trainer for over 18 years. He is a fellow of the American Academy of Podiatric Practice Management and the recipient of that organization's Presidential Award in 2012 for his significant contributions to podiatry. Rem was also inducted into the Podiatric Management Podiatry Hall of Fame in 2019 for the impact he has made on the profession. It's my understanding that he may be the only recipient of this award who is not a podiatrist. I think this presentation will be both informative and entertaining as Rem provides actionable steps to help you grow your practice. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Rem Jackson.
Well, thank you, Joe, very, very much for that really, really great introduction. And I'll only make one change to it. And you probably, it was your understanding that I'm the only non-podiatrist to ever receive that. You probably got that notion from me when I mentioned it to you when it happened, because that's what I thought. But it turns out I'm the 13th non-podiatrist to receive that award. They opened up that category for non-podiatrists a few years ago. So, but out of the thousands and thousands of people, to be selected and chosen for really a top award like that in the industry is really something I'm very grateful for. And I'm also delighted to be with everybody here tonight. I have a lot of respect for Cutting Edge Lasers, not only for the high quality materials, but their customer service and their commitment. This is the thing that distinguishes them the most from so many other companies that operate inside, the medical space, and certainly in podiatry, where I spend almost all my time. And that is that they get it, and they really understand that you can have a high quality device that can produce all kinds of clinical results, but if you're not able to market that and be able to explain it and be able to utilize it and then run your practice in a way that allows you some room to be as efficient as possible, that it's always going to be a struggle. And they've shown that commitment to my Top Practices members for years now. And so I'm really happy to be here participating. Joe, if you want to move on to the next slide, I want to share one of my favorite quotes of all time. I've probably started every presentation I've done for 10 years, maybe 15 years with this. In times of change, the learners will inherit the earth while the knowers remain beautifully prepared for a world that no longer exists. Well, folks, if we were ever in a time of change, we're there now. So many of the things that you thought were canon, that you thought you knew, are really at this point up for grabs, and that creates enormous opportunities. I mean, this cloud that we have been living in since early 2020 is very dark. And I always start with remembering the soon to be 100,000 people in this country that have lost their lives, and those that are sick and are struggling tonight, and the 30 million people that are currently struggling right now with the loss of their jobs and all the deep uncertainty. And that's where I always start. But I happen to be a person that looks to the light always. I never look to the dark. It's easy to go that way. But lightness has a call that's hard to hear, but you can focus on it. And there are silver linings everywhere. And really, that's where I'm at tonight with you to share a message about those silver linings. But it only is possible if your mind is open. That old phrase, and it might have been the guy that started that cookie company, Famous Amos, that says, your mind's like a parachute. It only works if it's open. So, Joe, you can move to the next slide. As we move along with this tonight, I think this is going to be hopefully helpful to many of you. That's my goal. So thank you again for the opportunity and the privilege. This thing right now looks like this giant obstacle that's in front of us. But Ryan Holiday wrote a tremendous book. And if you spend any time with me, as the folks from Cutting Edge know, I like to recommend books because books are written by people that have something to say. And generally, it is of value. And if it's not, you don't keep reading it. But Ryan Holiday wrote a book called The Obstacle is the Way, about how to look at every single challenge in front of you, whether it's personal, whether it's a relationship, whether it's financial, whether it's anything that is really that each one of us has our thing that's bothering us. And we think, yeah, but it's worse for me because you don't understand it. This is what's happening with me. We all have that. And so the old Stoics, the ancient Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, that's who really came up with this concept of Stoicism, and the obstacle is the way. It would say that the barrier in front of you is actually the way forward, and to embrace that. Because the challenges you face right now, when instead of running from them, hiding from them, worrying about them, fretting about them, giving them strength and power, if you just simply say, all right, well, how are we going to solve this problem? How am I going to find someone to help me that knows about this problem? And then you go under it, around it, through it, over it. And if you find that it's an absolutely unmovable obstacle, then you take that little spot on the right or the left, however you happen to think, and you build the new road. Because on the other side, Joe, next slide, on the other side is always this, even some of the great tragedies that we all go through. Right now, I have national, reach and talk. Well, actually international. We're in Canada, Australia, and every state in the union. And across the board, in the middle of March, no one knew what was going to possibly happen. But now at the end of May, nationally, most of the practices that I work with are restored to about anywhere from about 50 to 90% of their pre-COVID volumes. And this is not easy, and social distancing and all that's going to have to happen along with this, but it's created an enormous amount of potential and opportunities. We've been in an incredibly tight labor market for 6 years. We are not now. You want to find good people? They're there, and they're looking for work. Some of the practices that I work with have been really, one of the hardest positions to fill inside a podiatry practice is podiatrist. And now, because of this terrible dark cloud, high quality, good potential candidates are showing up everywhere. So remember, if you allow that giant obstacle, that thing that just keeps you up in the middle of the night, that will not let you sleep, if you allow it to overtake you, you're postponing your ability to get over to the other side. So Joe, we'll go on to the next slide. Now, I want to talk tonight, and this was my original discussion with the folks from Cutting Edge, because this is a management and a marketing call. And so how is it that, why is it that some people just seem to do everything right? It looks like they fall into something and they come out better off than they were before. What is it about those successful people versus the people that are muddling along or those that are really struggling? And and it's really about focus. Charles Duhigg wrote an incredible book called The Power of Habit, and he talks about how we really are nothing but a bundle of habits. In fact, this is interesting. Your routine, if you look at this, what you do every day is almost 95% identical every day. A real understanding that can really help you in gaining some leverage, because if you just know what you're doing and you change your routine, that's what can create all of this forward momentum for you. So I want to share with you 3 points of leverage that exist, whether you're in a podiatry practice, whether you're in a legal practice, a veterinary practice, medical practice of some other kind, or any kind of business. But here it is for my doctors. The first one that you want to look at is your patient volume, or your customers, your clients. That's the first thing. So you focus on the number and the quality of the people that come to your business every single day. They come to your reception room or they contact you. So in our case, we're going to talk about patient volume. How many patients do you see in a given day? The second one is the per visit revenue. Now, per visit revenue, and I'll define this a little more in detail in a moment, is how much revenue, how much collected comes in the door every time a patient walks through the door for an appointment. And that number, knowing that number against the benchmark of others and yourself, can be an incredibly important number to focus on. And then the third one is, what does your practice generate every hour that is open and you're in clinic seeing patients? What's the dollars per hour? Now, everyone on this call has too much to do. There's way too many numbers to think about. There's way too many things on your to-do list that you really need to get down to your should-do list. But I'm here to tell you that if you focus on these 3 numbers, exclusively these 3 numbers, the things that you'll need to do in order to achieve higher results in these simple 3 points of leverage, the strongest point in the fulcrum that'll move the most, if you improve these to the levels that we'll talk about, everything else will take care of itself. That's the secret that people that seem to be able to get. How does Richard Branson accomplish what he does? He's only looking at the important stuff. And this is the important stuff. So we'll look at the next slide and move on now to patient volume. So we'll talk about that. So in the typical, by the way, I want to make a point to everyone that everybody's numbers are different. What you're comfortable with, I have some podiatrists that see 60 patients a day. I have some that see 22 and they're like, I don't know how I could see any more. Everybody's different. But I will tell you that my observation is that 32 patients a day is really sort of the sweet spot for most of my podiatrists. Now, whatever your number is, go with that. But that's sort of the sweet spot that I've seen. If you're seeing 32 patients a day, at least 4 days a week, then you're operating at a pretty good level. What you want to do is you want to have 20% of those patients be new every single day. So 20%, if you see 100, you want 20 of those to be new patients. They're the lifeblood of the business. They are generally much higher per visit revenues, and they're profitable, and they're important for the business. So in order to achieve that, that's a function of 2 things. Next slide. That is marketing and it's customer service. So let's talk about the marketing side of this. Almost no matter what business you're in, your patients can only come to you from one of 4 places. They can come to you from the internet, which is of course increasingly more valuable and important than ever across the board. They can come to you from other referral sources. Those are medical referral sources and non-medical referral sources that are in a somewhat symbiotic relationship with you, that if they just knew that you were accepting patients and that you could be there as a trusted extension of their care or service, they would send you patients. And then there is your list, that group of people who know you, like you, trust you. That's your database. That's your active patients, inactive patients, really inactive patients, anyone that's ever requested information from you, anyone that knows you. And then finally, there's the community. Those are things you could do out in the community that include advertising, include sponsorships, include many of the things that we've thought about in the past, television, radio, whatever. The only thing I will say, next slide please, is that when you're out in that fourth pillar, which is external marketing, that's the community and advertising, that's broadcast, that can be expensive. And so you need to have the first 3 pillars of marketing. If there's only 4 places that patients can come to you from, there's only 4 places that we're going to try to engage and educate them to come to the practice so that they can have you help them. And that's online. That's everything that's involved in online marketing. That's what I call shoe leather marketing. This is the medical and the non-medical referral sources around you. Someone, generally not you, doctor, unless you're very new in practice and you have the time, and that's how everybody starts. They go around and they meet people. I used to say shake hands. I don't think we're doing that much anymore. And I'd like to also say, just so we're clear, that during this period of time that we're in right now, today, May 19th, 2020, we're not doing this face-to-face either. Phone calls are being made, faxes are being done, outreach is happening. Some folks are taking sidewalk chalk and putting a real nice thank you so much, you're our heroes, on their doorsteps of their referring offices, but we're not out making those visits. But you want a ray of sunshine personality that's going to go out there and do those visits, because nurture, nurture, nurture. That's the most important words, 3 most important words in marketing. That you do that with your referral sources. And then again, internal marketing is word of mouth. That should always be your number 1 source of new patients, new business, more people needing to have the pain in their feet taken care of by the laser that this company provides so well. That's all through nurturing, educating, and marketing. And so that's where customer service, how you treat folks, that you turn them into raving fans. So when they leave, they say, you know what, I love my podiatrist. I just do. And then finally, the other things you might do out in the community. But if your website's not perfect and set up right and SEO'd really well, if you don't have all the rest of this in place so that you can make offers and find out, and people that are saying, I've got a lot of pain, I don't know, well, take a listen to this or read this, and then give them some time to give you their name and their email minimally so that we can communicate to them over time. Some of these folks that come into your marketing funnels may not come to see you for, you all know how long people wait. It could be a year. So anyway, if there's only 4 places patients can come to you from, next slide, there's 4 pillars of marketing, and that is our system in top practices. The number 1 asset in your practice, other than you and your really well-trained staff, next slide, is your list. Never forget that. What we do up on the web, what we do out in the community visiting referral sources, in our database, in our emails, with our newsletters, and anything we do out there are all designed to just build that list, your marketing funnel, because that's what makes your practice, next slide, healthy and just keeps you really where you need to be. Dr. Edward Deming is the father of total quality management movement. And he said this: if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. Next slide, please. And that's so true. Everything is run by systems. Okay, so let's talk about the next number. Remember, very first point of leverage, the number and the quality of patients that are coming into your practice every single day. The second one is your per visit revenue. Now, that is calculated by taking a period of time. For instance, the year 2019. So last year, you take the total collections that you had and you divide that very simply by the total number of patient visits that you had, all those appointments, whether they were coming in for surgery follow-ups, there wasn't a charge. It's just every single patient visit, and it's going to give you a number. That number nationally is $95. Every time a patient walks into a podiatry office in the United States, on average, $95 in collections revenue is generated for the practice. Now that will go, and then there are people, sadly, there are people that have lower per visit revenue than that for a variety of issues. About the highest that I have seen is around $230 to $250 every single time somebody walks in the door. So that's the range in here. Now, what really matters is that you know your number. And then let's say yours is 120. Now, the beautiful part about this number is that in order for that number to go up, you have to manage your practice better. Next slide, please. And what that does is it makes every one of those, it makes you practice more comprehensively. You're not rushing, you're not doing the things that you need to do, and your patient outcomes go up. This is the beautiful part about this. When you graph these, not only do your patient outcomes go up, but your profits go up. And that's just about as nice a situation at a medical practice can ever have. Per visit revenue is supported and helped by having written and trained protocols for everything. Heel pain happens to be a very common protocol or a very common condition in podiatry. So you have this protocol of exactly what do we do? First visit, second visit, third visit with heel pain. Your staff knows, you know, you're sharp. I mean, down to when you're sitting in the treatment room and you know what the patient is here for, everything is laid out right beside you, and you don't have to turn around, slide over, open a drawer, get the thing, turn around, slide back. That 5 seconds, when you multiply that by the amount of time in a year that you spend rolling around in your office, it drastically reduces your efficiency. So protocols and training, another excellent area are ancillary services, especially those that include cash, because cash is a beautiful, wonderful part of your business. You simply need to get really good. First of all, you have to believe in it. And if there's anyone on this particular webinar that has an MLS laser and doesn't believe in it, that surprises me, because I know everyone I've ever spoken to that has these units are raving fans of the outcomes that they get from their patients. You believe in it, and then you educate and you teach and you confidently recommend it, and you'll find that your numbers your patient outcomes drastically increase. This is the perfect example of this, and so do your profits. And why not have a profitable practice? And finally, knowing your numbers. I've talked about these three. We really track a subgroup of numbers that support these three top numbers, and you need to know your numbers. Anytime you know your numbers, and we spend an inordinate amount of time in top practices teaching our doctors their marketing numbers, their business numbers, and also their clinical numbers. You're going to have an opportunity, and we'll talk about the date, to hear from one of my colleagues, Dr. Peter Wishney, that along with Tina Del Buono run our top practices Virtual Practice Management Institute. And Dr. Wishney is the absolute king of knowing your numbers. Our doctors have learned enormous amounts of information from him about, if you know your numbers, you know what's wrong, or you don't know what's wrong, but you know where to look. And by the way, you also know where things are right. And you say, how can we do more of that? So next slide, please. That's the second point of leverage. And here's the third. Dollars per hour. This is something we've been working at now for about a year in top practices. I mean, it's common sense when you think about it, but none of us had really looked at it in podiatry this closely. This is simply a calculation of every hour that your practice is open and you're in clinic, you're seeing patients. If you're in the office and you're catching up on paperwork, doesn't count. If you're doing what we recommend, which is taking your marketing time, your rainmaking time, your strategy time, and your meeting with your top people time, that doesn't count either. This is when you're open and your practice is open and you and your staff are seeing patients. This gives you a look at how efficient your practice really is in the utilization of its people, of its additional modalities and ancillaries, of the treatment rooms that are being used. And then we like to think about, one of the doctors you're going to hear from on part 2 of this is Dr. Kevin Moland, who really was the first one to point out some of these some of these concepts. In his one office that he has, there are 2 physician providers. They have schedules. And then there is a room with an MLS laser in it that is treated as its own provider. And the MAs are running and managing and working that room. There's another one with a laser for fungal toenails. There's another one that has shockwave. There's all these different rooms, but we look at those as additional providers. This is when you're really, really running your practice the way a highly effective business does. Next slide. This is dollars per hour. Now, what I want to do is show you how important this concept is. I'm going to show you 4 doctors now. These are real people that I know that shared their data with me. So the first one I call Dr. Dollar per hour. This is Dr. Average. And I only average in that this is kind of where many, not all by any means, practices are. This doctor in 2019 collected $643,000. This doctor was in the clinic seeing patients with his staff 1,198 hours. His practice generated $537 every hour that it was open. So that's Dr. Average. That's actually a very average. I've seen this, people fall in, if you look at a scatter graph, they will cluster right around here. Next slide. So I'm going to tell you about another doctor. This was Dr. Melissa Lockwood in, I think this might have been her 2018 numbers. I call her Dr. Relaxed and Happy. Now, she collected in her in that year by herself $732,000. She was in the clinic 761 hours. So you can see she full-time practice. She now has an associate doctor, so these numbers are all kind of way up there. But she has not a full-time practice in that regard. I mean, she's in the office doing things. She's working on marketing, but she saw patients only 761 hours because that's how she prioritizes things, and that's the way she wants it. That's possible for her. How could she work so few hours compared to Dr. Average and outperform drastically Dr. Average? That's because every hour that she is open, her practice generates $963. Now that happens to be not the highest end, but the highest ones I've seen is about $1,200 or $1,400 an hour. They're running incredibly efficiently, but this is way up there. So she has all kinds of options because she's operating that way, she's managing in this way. Next slide. The next doctor I'm going to show you, you'll meet next on part 2 of this, and this is Dr. Crushing It, Kevin Molan. So in 19, he collected $1.2 million in the clinic, 1,221 hours. So he's working more, obviously, than the Dr. Relaxed and Happy, but his practice is generating $989 every hour he's open. So he's working almost the same as Dr. Average, hours-wise, and generating twice the revenue. And his outcomes are through the roof. He has an entirely dedicated MLS provider schedule. That's one of the things that he does to make this happen. Now let's look at the fourth doctor. This is Dr. Exhausted and Unhappy. This is a real number, and it's not that unusual, unfortunately. This doctor in 2019 collected $349,000. And take a look at that, in working that hard, in clinic 2,036 hours. That is a lot of time. And collecting $172 every hour they're open. So the only question that I have with this doctor is, how do we get to $550 an hour? Because it'll drastically change this doctor's life. And you could back down 800 hours less and still get back to Dr. Average numbers. That exhaustion goes away, the unhappiness goes away, and the promise of having your own practice can start to be realized. And then can we get really good and begin to move up to the kinds of numbers that the other two are putting up? That's the power of knowing these 3 simple point of leverage numbers. Next slide, please. So I hope that was helpful and explained really why we care so much about practice management, why we care so much about good marketing. It makes your life better. It makes you a better, less tired doctor. And it helps you provide for the emotional, financial stability and security of your family to its utmost in your preferred given field and your chosen field. So maximum efficiency is the goal that we have for all of this. How much do you generate per hour? You want a reception room filled with your perfect patients and the numbers that you want, and the new patient numbers that you want. You want an A-team staff trained to deliver care efficiently with you. And as I said before, silver lining of this time is all of a sudden the labor market's not tight. It's the opposite of that. And that is an opportunity for us. Utilize your space and your time to deliver as much care as possible. One of the biggest limiters that I've seen are the number of treatment rooms that a doctor can use. So as long as you can expand out into these treatment rooms and you and your staff can deliver simultaneous care, you have a real opportunity to be really, really efficient. And remember, your practice, we don't try to get practices bigger. Bigger is bigger. Better is better. Next slide. That is, I couldn't tell you anything more true than that. I've seen, there is a law of diminishing returns. Now, by the way, there are people that manage 12 doctors, 7 locations, and it's great because they just happen to be really superb at that. One of my practices went from 1.1 million to about 6.7 million in 5 years, and they did it with style. So I'm not saying that bigger isn't your path, but I've also watched people that built, they thought, oh, I'm supposed to get more offices, I'm supposed to get more doctors. And they found out that they have more headaches, their revenue is much higher, but their costs are so high that they're making less money than they used to. You have to do this smart. So next slide, please. And as I'd said at the outset with the thought about what's your challenge, what is it in front of you? You have it. You sit there, I mean, as you're listening right now, you could say it out loud. Okay, well, this is my problem. Every one of us has that. It doesn't come easy. Next slide, please. It's all of us have our version of this great big boulder, you know, and this is the thing that keeps you up. This is what wakes you up at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and your mind's racing about this. This is what's really, really irking you. Next slide. And I just want to say once again that it doesn't have to be that way. On the other side of all of your problems, you need to know, I mean, you've always landed on your feet. You always will. The word fear, all the things we fear, is false events appearing real, F-E-A-R. Next slide, please. So there was a movie that I saw. Oh, I think it'll come maybe possibly a little later here, and I'll share it then. So this is Top Practices. I just want you to know where to go. There are a lot of resources on here that might be helpful to you, regardless of whether you're in podiatry or not. In the Learning Center, you'll see a lot of things. There's a list there called the must-read list of all the books that I think you would be greatly benefited from. Plus, there's tons and tons of resources. Just want you to know you should come there. Next slide, please. In addition, one of the ways that we're trying to serve our doctors, we're actually, we are still going to have face-to-face meetings. If you're in podiatry on July 31st, August 1st, in downtown Las Vegas, in a state-of-the-art meeting facility, we are going to have our Top Practices Business Solution Mastermind Seminar, which I will be doing with Dr. Peter Wishney, Tina Del Buono, who is our staff coach and mentor, and then myself. That'll be a small group. It's limited to 20 practices. You can come to the website and check it out. And also, in Denver, Colorado, October 16, 17, and 18, we're going to have our annual summit where you're welcome to come. We do it once a year. We'll have all the, we'll do everything right, and we'll have everybody separated. It should be easy to do. We have a large space. So that'll be in October. We'll see what things are like then. Next slide, please. But I want to share with you something else that I think might be useful to you. You can come to the website and you can download these free ebooks. The one was written by Dr. Wishney. The biggest surprises, well, no, the running a successful medical practice should be a dream, not a nightmare. That'll support much of what I'm doing. And then I've got a simple little book that you download that you can get called Why Most Podiatry Marketing Doesn't Work. Next slide, please. Another thing that might be useful to you as a resource is that I wrote an actual book called Podiatry Prosperity. It's not a marketing book or whatever. This is a real attempt on my part to provide you with an awful lot of information about marketing and the mindset and the business practices that will make your podiatry practice prosperous, or your veterinary practice, or your OBGYN, whatever it is that you do. This it addresses that. And then Dr. Peter Wishney, who you'll hear it from again, is he just released this book. It's brand new, just came out in February. The Podiatry Business Solution, everything you need to know to flourish in your podiatry business. And it is one of those books that will never leave your desk because you always have to refer to it. I kind of think mine's that way too. Next slide. But You come to Amazon and pick them up, it's almost nothing. So apparently I'm the person that said this. Money doesn't make you happy, but being happy, focusing on all of that first, can make you an awful lot of money. I tried to find the person that said that, and it turns out I couldn't. So I'm claiming that as my quote. Next slide, please. But it is so, so very true. All the way from Jeff Bezos, or pardon me. Let's go back to that question, not the slide, but the question. Does money make you happy? And the answer is yes and no. So if you don't have enough money for security, shelter, or food, and you're able to acquire enough money to provide for security, shelter, and food, you are a lot happier, a lot happier. But after that, all the way up to Jeff Bezos, there's no correlation whatsoever in the amount of money that you have and how happy you are. In fact, the more money you have, the more miserable you can become. And so, as I said, money doesn't make you happy, but being happy can make you an awful lot of money. And that is the purpose of mindset. I think, I don't know if I have a slide in this or not, I don't recall, but I have a podcast you can check out too, anywhere you get podcasts. It's called Prosperity and Something Greater. It's not about podiatry, it's not about marketing, it's not directly about business, and it's all about success and business. And you can either type in my name, Rem Jackson, or Prosperity and Something Greater. Just another resource for you after today. Next slide then, thank you, Joe. And so, you have to think about, what do you want? What do you actually want in life? Next slide, because it's up to you. So a couple things I just want to share with you. Part 2 will be Thursday, May 28th at 8 p.m. Eastern, and Dr. Relaxed and Happy and Dr. Crushing It will join us, because we're going to go back and we're going to review, okay, those are the 3 points of leverage. Now, how did you go about getting the ability to have the practices were that efficient? They're outstanding practitioners and wonderful people and just great caring doctors. So I'm looking forward to returning to this and bringing along some A players to love to share how they did it with you. And then the next slide, we'll talk about my friend and my colleague, Dr. Peter Wishney, and he's going to be doing a webinar on implementing and selling new practice services. Here's the thing, it can be so difficult for people that are, even people who have a job that is sales, can be very, very intimidating and hard to, to sell things to people. I don't believe in it. I think you just communicate well. If you communicate really well, but you have to, there's the occasional sociopath that doesn't need this, but the rest of us, you need to believe. When you tell someone that we need to use an MLS laser with you, and this is how this is the protocol that we're going to have to get you better and to alleviate this pain in your soul, you have to believe it. And when you do, you can do this in such a simple, easy, comfortable way that you're actually surprised when someone says they don't want to do it, not anticipating, here we go again. Next slide, please. And so I just want to share something with you. It's a story. And it's a video that I saw, a little movie, like about a 2-minute movie. About a year ago, I guess I saw this. And there's a man, imagine a man sitting in front of like a large building, could be a library or a courthouse, big steps behind him, big marble steps. He's just sitting there in front and he's begging. He's on a big piece of cardboard. There's a can in front of him and a little sign beside him. And the sign says, "I'm blind, please help." And the occasional person comes by and drops a coin in his can. Not doing well. A woman walks up, stands in front of him, and the way they do this in the movie, he reaches down and he puts his hands on her shoes, and he knows their shoes. She kneels down, looks at him, she grabs his sign, doesn't say a word. She grabs his sign and she turns it over, has a Sharpie with her. She writes something else, puts it down beside him, and walks off. A little time elapses, we see him again, and now every single person coming by is dropping a coin or multiple coins. His can is full, There's stuff all over the money all over the mat, and he's trying to collect it all. And all of a sudden you hear clip, 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 and here she comes, the woman that changed his sign. And she stands in front of him. He reaches down, touches her shoes, recognizes it's her. And he looks at her and he says, "What'd you do to my sign?" And she said, she kneels down and she says, sort of in his ear, she says, "I wrote the same thing, only different." What she wrote was, "It's a beautiful day and I can't see it." That's just a pretty powerful little story in and of itself. But for me, do you remember that big boulder in front of us on that road? How many days have you actually been in a state of blessedness? You know, everybody in your family is healthy. You don't really have, like, the question to ask is, what actually is lacking today? But you're just thinking about that problem. How many times has it been a beautiful day and you just can't see it because your mind is racing with the challenge or the problem or how mad you are about something? What a waste of our life that truly is. And so I told that story to my top practices members, and one of my doctors wrote me back very shortly after and said, "Rem, you know," he had recently contacted me, brand new practitioner, about 2.5 years in, small staff, 2 people, and he called me, or he contacted me in a panic because they all quit on the same day, and he was like, "I don't know if I'm really cut out for this private practice stuff," and I kind of was like, "Snap out of it. It's going to be fine in 2 weeks, and this is an opportunity." Well, um, and that did happen. 2 weeks later, he has a better staff than ever. So, but that Saturday, this happened on, say, a Thursday. That Saturday, he went to a daddy-daughter dance with his young daughter. And he says, "Ram, I went to the dance with my daughter." And he said, "It was a beautiful day." And he says, "I wasn't even there. All I was thinking about was the problems I'm having at work." And he said, "I'll tell you something. I will never, ever again have a beautiful day and a chance to go to a daddy-daughter dance with my little girl and not be there and not be present." And so I just want to wish you all the absolute best. I hope that this has been useful and helpful. I'll turn it back over to Joe. I know that there might be some questions, and we'll go from there. So thank you very, very much for your kind attention.
Yeah, and thank you, Rem. We do have a few questions from the audience, so I'd like to go over a few of those. Rem, the first one I want to give back to you is, currently I don't spend much money on marketing my practice. Out of your 4 pillars of marketing, which would you say is the most cost effective and will give me the most bang for my buck? And then I'll also add, Rem, I'm seeing a few questions as well, so that if your suggestion is not shoe leather marketing, could you also speak to that and give a few suggestions of what people could do during COVID and this difficult time we find ourselves in?
Yeah, sure. That's great. So, okay, so, all right, here's my answer. None of the pillars are more important than the other ones. They're all equal. Now, I would not start ever with the 4th pillar, which is external marketing, which is advertising, sponsorship, and those kinds of things, because that is by far and above the most expensive. And remember, anything you do out in the community, you're trying to drive them back to primarily your website, because that's where all your offers are and that's where everything else is. And so, you know, my advice is to, first of all, recognize that when it's done well, marketing is an investment that should produce a lot more than it actually and ultimately the expense associated with it. And so most of us don't want to spend money on marketing. I mean, nobody wants a website. Nobody wants to, to do all of this stuff. It's just, it's money. And when it's your business, that money is right out of your pocket. So it can get really personal. But it's really the only way forward. These doctors that I'm talking about, they just have learned that you start to ramp up and you go there. So what would I do first and least expensively? Here's the number one thing you can do that is the least expensive thing you can do. And that is, you and your staff provide outstanding service, not just care. I'm sure everyone on here provides really outstanding care. You're all really good at what you do. but that it's done with a smile. It's done expeditiously. It's done really, really well. And then, doctor, when someone says to you, thank you so much, you should learn to have that become a trigger that goes off in your mind that says, oh, that I should request that they give me an online review. That's the time to do it. When someone says thank you. I mean, and the way to do it is so simple. And there's a 3-step process, which I'll share with you. And this is free, guys. This is just being good. So the first thing you do is to say, well, you're welcome. That's our mission. That's all we want to do here. And and I'm just so glad that this is working out. And by the way, if you have any friends that are just like you, not your grumpy friends, but the ones that are just like you, that are having any problems with their lower extremities, would you send them here? Because we would just love to help them, just like you. And do you ever review things online? Have you ever reviewed a business or a restaurant or anything like that? And if the answer is yes, the answer is no, you can say, okay, well, if you ever do that, we'd love it if you could find a way to do that. But if the answer is yes, and then you just simply say, is there any way you'd be willing to leave a nice review for us online? And almost all the time, they're going to say, sure, I'd be happy to do that. Now, they're not gonna, because they don't know it, but their basement's probably flooding right now. I mean, life is happening, and they're going to get busy, and they got to think about it and whatever. So one of the things that our doctors do is they have a little card, a little postcard that says, hey, here's how you could go review us. Now, here's the great thing. So you can send them to Google. You could send them to Yelp if that's appropriate in your market. You could send them to RateMD, Health Grades, Facebook, wherever you need to make sure your review profile's in good shape. Send them there, and you can direct them that way. So if you don't mind going there, that would be really helpful to us in that little card. And you can make up your mind where you're going to direct people. The 800-pound gorillas, of course, still always going to be Google. But here's the thing. And they'll say, okay, great, I'll do that. And no, they're not. It's really tough to get good reviews. So now you have a little way for you, whatever it is you do, a little sticky or whatever. If you've got a person that said to them, hey, they're going to be giving us a review. The person that's checking them out should know this, okay? And then what you do is that person needs to say, okay, oh my goodness, it says here you're going to give us a review online. And I kind of joke about this, but they should act like that person just invented Christmas or their birthday. Oh, bless your heart. You're so sweet. Well, thank you so much. Did the doctor give you that little card? And they'll say, yep, got it right here. Now here, by the way, is when this next step you can't eliminate. This will get you 2 out of 10, which is really, really high and really good. Can you imagine getting 1 or 2 reviews a week? Some are shooting for 1 a day. But if you were to get 30, 40 good reviews, I mean, this is the #1 way people judge. And it's weird. It could be people in prisons that are leaving these reviews. We don't know who these people are. But if you have great reviews, you think about it now. They'll say, oh, your reviews are so good. You say that, and that person says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send you an email right now with that link on there to make it super easy for you. So now it shows up, and they're like, okay. And then they take the moment. 8 out of 10 of them won't, but 2 will. And you can move forward that way. And some of you work with digital agencies that have customer voice systems, and they enable that. They'll send them a survey or stuff. Those are fine, and they work. But I really like the fact if you just go old school on this and try to generate those reviews. That's #1. Nothing will matter more than that. Secondly, you got to have a good website that has outstanding SEO and analytics. You got to find a company that you can work with. It's one of the things we do is we try to recommend those companies to our folks. There's in podiatry, there's a number of them that are just so inexpensive, and they promise the moon and they don't do much. And I won't speak to who those are, certainly publicly like that. But we try to help people with that. And so you want to make sure that you have a great website. And then, of course, it isn't, for you and your staff to just start to post things on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, it's not that hard. So you can do all of this somewhat shoestring, but don't skimp, never skimp in life on your computer monitor, your website, or your pillows. I mean, your pillows matter. I have the finest pillows. You can go to Down and Feather Company and get the best pillows ever. They're really super expensive, and I sleep like a baby now. So that's the first thing. And addressing the second question that you had, Joe, about shoe leather marketing, listen, now, first of all, let's be really clear. Nobody's doing that right now. I think I might have already addressed that. It's going to happen again. We will be opened back up, and making these visits is super. I'll share with you two simple ideas. Now, and one of them is one of the best. I mean, the best marketing thing that's ever existed is a great sign on a busy road. To this day, that's still the best thing you can have. An incredibly good, well-constructed website with offers and ability to make appointments and whatever is the second, one of the best things you can do. But going out and making visits to the medical and the non-medical referral sources around you that need your help, and that person's just going out there making friends and helping people. So Dr. Andrew Schneider in Houston, Texas gets all the credit for this idea. But what we do is you go online, you can go to shopmedvet.com and get the cheapest price you can get on prescription bottles. Prescription bottles, that's what they are. So you get a whole bunch of prescription bottles, you fill them up with M&Ms, and you put a label on it. The label says, it has your logo on it, and you just print them on your printer using Avery sheets. And then RX, take 2 as often as needed to reduce office stress. Quantity, don't know, we didn't count them. Refills, and then put that on there. When that person stops out and they make those visits, they walk up and they say, by the way, Dr. Kenrick wanted me to, has a prescription that he wanted me to leave here for everybody. And they're like, pardon me? And they're like, yeah, and then they get it out. How many folks are here? There's 12 of us. So they pull out 12 prescription bottles, and then they hand it over to the folks. And they're like, that is the cutest, coolest idea ever. And our folks become known as the foot M&M lady, the foot M&M guy, M&M foot guy. And when you come back, they'll run around, scurry around to get their prescription bottles and get their prescriptions refilled. I know it sounds, everybody says, come on, you got to be kidding me. I mean, that's so cheesy, but it's one of the best ideas ever. It works. It will open those doors and make you welcome, welcome, welcome. And then of course, there's literally dozens of other ideas. One recently is the idea of getting them some coffee. They get a local roaster and roast your own blend. One of the we're looking into like the little Keurig things, and if they can actually put them that way, because a lot of folks use that kind of a coffee machine now. But that's just a couple thoughts and ideas about that, and it's persistence. Remember, when your marketer is out there making those visits, helping people and making friends, that you're really only looking for a conversion into a good referring source, meaning at least one patient a week, of about 10%, 1 out of 10. If you can get 1 out of 10, it can transform your business. So I hope that's helpful.
Okay, thank you, Rem. Rem, I believe we do have one more time for one other question. And again, I will mention to everyone, because I am able to see we have additional questions. If we were unable to get to your question, as a reminder, we will send you an email response in the coming days. So Rem, another question here on the list is, I practice in a very rural part of my state and worry that increasing my patient volume may be an issue. In your experience, what is the best thing I can do to combat that?
Well, okay, so you're in a rural area and increasing your patient volume might be hard. I'm trying to understand if that's what they mean. So let's say whoever wrote that, if you want to write a clarification and Joe can see it, that would be super. But let's assume that's what you're suggesting. So here's the thing: there is no place in the country that is better than another one. When you're in a rural environment, one of my top doctors. So, for instance, Melissa Lockwood, who is Dr. Relaxed and Happy, is in Bloomington, Illinois, which is about, it has a college and a town there, but mostly you see you see cornfields out in that area. I've got people in right beside Dallas-Fort Worth Airport in Texas, in these fabulous, wonderful markets, and I've got folks in rural Kentucky. I've got folks all over the place. And so the thing to remember is that everyone around you has some sort of access now to the internet and utilizes it. everyone, and even and ages, they have nothing to do with that anymore. I mean, it's really changed so dramatically. And so, communicating, with who you have, and if you, one of the things you want to do with your digital marketer is to make sure that, when you're doing the search engine optimization, which is SEO, which I might have said earlier and I didn't define it, search engine optimization, not just for your town, but for the county or several counties around you. And I've got some doctors who don't have another podiatrist within 100 miles of them. And so, you have I just want to make sure that when people are coming online and they're asking questions, that they find you. And then remember, you have the same asset that and it's the best one that every other practice has. And that is the people who know you, like you, and trust you. And you want to communicate to them. You could send them a newsletter. I love newsletters. I just mailed my monthly newsletter to everybody in North America on my list, because communicating with newsletters works. But I don't want you to feel that because you're in a rural area that you're in any way disabled compared to someone that's in a bigger area. Because remember, your mix is really different too. They're competing in some cases with big hospital systems, lots of other competitors. And by the way, John Holtman said this to me years ago, and I believe this. There's not a podiatrist alive that is your competitor. Stupidity and Walmart are your competitors. And so I never consider podiatrists to be competitive. If one's a rising tide floats all boats. And so there are other places people could go. You just want to make sure that they understand, and by communicating, and it really, marketing is teaching. It really is just teaching. Like tonight is just about teaching. And by the way, folks, my email is up on the screen. If you want to email me directly, just go ahead. Just reference that you were on this webinar tonight, and I'll respond that way as well. Hope that was helpful.
Great. Thank you, Rem. Rem, thank you for your time tonight and that amazing presentation. And thanks everyone for joining us tonight. As a reminder, all attendees will be sent a copy of the presentation and a recording in the coming days. This concludes tonight's webinar with Rem Jackson. I hope everyone can join us next Thursday, May 28th, for part 2. Thank you and enjoy your evening.